Hello, hi, my name is Crypto Sport, and in this video I'll go through the latest sporting developments. Before we get started, if you can hit the like and subscribe button, currently sitting at 451 subscribers, hoping to hit the 1,000 mark. So what I wanted to do is cover off the Gary Lineker saga, should we say. Gary Lineker obviously tweeted this week following Suella Braverman's tweet here. Have a listen to it.
Made the unsafe. Last year, over 45,000 people made the unsafe, unnecessary and illegal journey across the Channel. Our asylum system has been overwhelmed. We're now spending almost £7 million a day on hotels. Stopping the boats is one of the 5 promises the Prime Minister has made to the British people, and it's my top priority. That's why today I'm announcing a new illegal migration bill to do exactly that. The Prime Minister and I have been working flat out for months to bring this legislation to Parliament. This bill will mean that if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. You will be detained and removed to your home country if safe, or a safe third country like Rwanda. We are committed to helping those in need, like the hundreds of thousands of people we have supported from Ukraine, Afghanistan and Hong Kong in recent years. But it's not fair that people who travel through a string of safe countries and then come to the UK illegally can jump the queue and game our system. This bill will bring an end to that. Enough is enough. We must stop the...
Long story short, Lineker replied to the tweet saying that it had similarities to 1930s Germany, implying the Nazi reference as in Germany in 1930s. Received a big backlash given the fact that he works for the BBC. He's meant to be impartial. One thing to note with Lineker is he is a freelancer, so he does work for other organisations like BT Sport, etc. You see him on Champions League coverage. It's had a big outroar. A lot of people have called for Lineker to be sacked as a result of it. Quite ironic because there's other presenters who have also tweeted or referenced their political views and have had no ramifications, and I'll go through that here. I'll share a couple of examples below. It's worth noting here. Here we go. Here's a good example from the Sky Sports, who put out a short segment on what they thought was fair or unfair.
This and saying, how come Andrew Neil, one of the most high-profile political journalists and interviewers on the BBC for many, many years, how come he is allowed to be the chairman of a right-wing magazine, The Spectator? How come he is allowed to express political opinions on Twitter as much as he wants? How come the chairman of the BBC, Richard Sharp, the chairman, is somebody who donated £400,000 to the Conservative Party? Someone who has helped arrange an £800,000 loan for the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. How come Robbie Gibb, or as we have to call him, Sir Robbie Gibb, who used to be the communications director for the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, how come he's on the BBC board at the moment? Why is Alan Sugar allowed to say what he wants on Twitter about political matters? What about Jeremy Clarkson? He's got a column in The Sun. He's got a column in the Sunday Times. He was on the BBC. He frequently expressed political opinions which many people think are extreme on social media. And why is the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, the Director General? He used to be the Deputy Chairman of the Hammersmith and Fulham Conservative Party. He's a man who's stood as a candidate in local elections for the Conservative Party. So why is all this allowed, yet Gary Lineker is not allowed to make a fairly innocuous comment, which many, many people would agree with, about a policy that has been condemned by the United Nations and also by many human rights groups? And this is the same Gary Lineker who's been allowed on the BBC to criticise the human rights record of Qatar. Why is he not allowed to criticise the human rights record of the country he lives in? And
I think that's pretty much summed it up, like to the T. 2-minute video. As I say to you, there's other people who work for the BBC, like Jeremy Clarkson, who made repulsive marks about Meghan Markle in his column in The Sun. Alan Sugar, who's tweeted stuff which I'll show you above, which is ridiculous in terms of he compared the Ghanaian team he goes, I recognise some of these guys from the beach in Marbella, and he was allowed to tweet that. He also said, hello, Mick Lynch, are you happy with yourself bringing the country and regularly criticising government policy? He was a big person who wanted to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, etc. As I say to you, Jeremy Clarkson's also said striking public workers should be shot, like views like that. So yeah, it's been really interesting. Aleister Campbell's come out in support, and again, the BBC is quite hypocritical.
So there you go. Let's talk to Aleister Campbell, who's co-host of the Rest is Politics podcast, and that is a podcast that is produced by a company which is owned by Gary Lineker. So Aleister Campbell, thanks for being with us. I guess in some ways you have, you've got business links, shall we say, with Gary Lineker, because you work on that podcast that is part of his company. But what do you think of this announcement by the BBC that he is stepping back from Match of the Day?
Well, I'll come to the second part later, but let me just say that is unbelievable that you feel you have to make that point clear right at the top.
Well, it's true.
Wait a minute. Yes, it is true. But does it mean, for example, that every BBC bulletin now should begin with the words, we should point out to viewers that the BBC is chaired by a man who makes massive donations to the Conservative Party and who helped Boris Johnson get an £800,000 loan?
I'm just pointing out, explaining to the viewers that you do have a business connection with him.
Well, but I'm making the point that I think that plays into the bigger point I'm going to make to you, that I think this decision is driven by an utterly craven political cowardice at the top of the BBC. And that is what has led to Gary Lineker.
You see a lot of people have come out in support of Lineker. Gary Lineker was pulled off air by the BBC because he refused to issue a public apology for his tweets. Lineker rejects the idea he breached social media guidelines, which is what today's BBC statement claims. Partly because of his contract does not contain those guidelines. Also, the BBC statement more or less confirms that he has been subject to such guidelines because it says he won't be back on Match of the Day until there's agreed and clear position on his use of social media. This led to a backlash. A lot of people have come out in support of Lineker, at least so his colleagues. Ian Wright refuses to do the show. Alan Shearer refuses to do the show. Other people who have asked to cover for Lineker have said no. I think it's awesome, in my personal opinion, that people have come out in support of Lineker and are not afraid of the consequences. We even saw Jurgen Klopp and the professional football associations today saying that players do not want to give interviews to the BBC. I think this is how you handle such situations like this. We saw a similar situation. I wouldn't say similar. Muhammad Ali back in the 70s and 80s when he refused to go to the Vietnam War. When he was drafted, he said he didn't want to kill innocent people. He lost his heavyweight title as a result and was put in prison unlawfully, in my opinion. So I think it's really good that people, especially his colleagues, Lineker's colleagues, have come out in support of him. It's just amazing that that's come out, and you can see the backlash on Twitter. You've seen people like Piers Morgan come out. Let me know your comments below. Obviously, these are my views. They don't represent anyone I work for or anything like that. But I do think it's awesome that people have come out in support of him. I think a lot of big corporations hide behind these slogans like the BBC do, like they're impartial, etc. They try to get people scared by saying that they're going to pull them off air. But you can see what's happened here. It's backfired quite handsomely. Even today, that they're not going to have any commentators. The commentators are refusing to do it. So yeah, if you just take a look at the latest from last...
Rob Harris is at the BBC's headquarters tonight. And Rob, so many headaches for the BBC, the first of which is what to do with Match of the Day tomorrow. They do have a plan, though.
Yes, but they've had to rip up the format for a 6-decade footballing institution. There will be no presenter, there will be no pundits, and there will be no studio experts at all. If the BBC hoped that dropping Gary Lineker would diffuse this crisis, well, the mutiny amongst the pundits and his colleague certainly suggested otherwise. We had Alan Shearer and others announcing that they would not take part in a show without Gary Lineker on Saturday night. And it's unclear even if commentators will still provide the voice for those games, so the show can go ahead. Sky News is also just learning that players in the Premier League are forming a collective position about whether they go ahead and give interviews to the BBC. So a situation that has far-reaching ramifications within broadcasting, but far deeper so as well within the BBC. There's a sense in the building behind me of potential double standards. We've seen internal messages from within the BBC that point out if the BBC does care about impartiality, which this whole saga is about, well, why does their ultimate boss, the chairman of the BBC, Richard Sharp, get himself involved in facilitating loans for prime ministers? We've had this.
So yeah, as I say to you, I've summarised it quite well. I do think it's awesome that his colleagues have come out in support. Kudos to them. They could be affecting their jobs and their future, but I think it's always important to remember to stay on the right side on what you believe in. If you found the video useful, please hit the like and subscribe button. As I say, these are my views, not views of anyone I represent or anything. So yeah, hope to see you guys soon. Thank you, everyone.